Jesus Christ is risen. He is risen indeed. But a year ago, this church was empty. It was a dark time. We didn't know what was going to happen. We were stuck at home. We didn't know much about this virus and the pandemic and how it would go. Many people were dying somewhere else, not yet here. Separated this past year from our family, our loved ones, burying pillars of this parish, men and women who have lived in this parish since its foundation, even before 1967 when this church was built. They've gone home to the Father, many of them this past year, not just because of COVID, but they're in their 90s. Some of us haven't seen or hugged loved ones for over a year now, and yet here we are. But the church isn't full. I remember when it would be so packed that people would come in, walking in with their coffees and chewing gum. It was wonderful. Not that they were chewing gum or walked in with their Starbucks, but because they were here and I hadn't seen them in a year. The churches would be full. People standing around the back. Someone will be sitting in your pew right now, right, taking your spot that you haven't seen in a year, at least since Christmas. It was great. And yet here we are, instead of an empty church, half full or half empty, however you want to look at it. It's been a gradual process from the darkness of last year and Easter celebration, quote unquote, home alone without Mass, without being able to receive the Eucharist for you. And now here we are, half full or half empty, depending on how you look at it. It's been a gradual process. Dark times to a gradually full, to the hope of it being packed next year, God willing. That gradual process is very much how Mary of Magdalene's faith was marked. Remember, in the Gospel today of John, it says that she came to the tomb early in the morning while it was still dark. Dark and light is a major theme in John's Gospel. It begins in the very first chapter where he talks about Jesus as the light of the world. The light has come into the world, and the darkness has not overcome it. Light and dark is a profound theme for John, and the fact that Mary of Magdalene comes to the tomb while it's still dark, John is telling us she doesn't believe. She comes to see a corpse. In Mark's Gospel, in the resurrection appearance or account, Mary of Magdalene, Mary the wife of Clopas, the sister of Mary, cousin of Mary, and Mary the mother of Jesus go to the tomb early in the morning, but Mark says after the sun had risen, they come with faith. Mary of Magdalene, on the other hand, comes waiting to see a corpse. Not unlike many Catholics who come to Mass every Sunday. It's just a dead body. It's a tradition. We have to go. It's Easter, blah, blah, blah. Mom made me. The wife made me. Whatever it is, right? We come to see a corpse because nothing changes. If anything, we just get more sad when we leave Mass. Many Catholics, many of us have gone through that, or maybe you're there now. We come to see a dead religion. With the scandals of this past few decades now and constant scandals coming up and more realization of how profound and troubling it's been, it seems like every time we come to Mass, we're like Mary of Magdalene. We come to see a corpse. And when we leave, sometimes we're even more depressed, like when we go to a cemetery than when we came. And yet, she came. She came. Even though her faith was not there yet. She came even though just a few days before she saw Jesus firsthand breathe his last, and she helped put his body in the tomb. Even though God was dead to her, she came. That's what gets us through. Even though we felt like God has been dead to us this past year, we have come. Even if we think we've come to see a corpse. And Mary of Magdalene comes and she sees the stone removed and she doesn't know what to do. This isn't how I expected it to be. And she runs to Peter, not to John, who was there with her when he died. She runs to Peter, the one who had just a few days ago denied him 3 times and disappeared. Here Mary of Magdalene is standing at the foot of the cross. Peter is nowhere to be found. John is right next to her, but she goes to Peter because he is the head of the church. In spite of his faults and failings, he is the vicar of Christ on earth. They have taken the Lord from the tomb, and we don't know where they put him. Where is Jesus? We've been saying that all this past year. Jesus, where are you? As we bury the dead, as we talk to our loved ones through a window in the nursing home, as we can't travel, as we've put on the pounds or suffered from depression and addiction. Jesus, where are you? They've taken my Lord, and I don't know where they've put him. And so Peter and John, the beloved disciple, they run. What? Mary tells them. They run to the tomb, and John beats him because John is much younger. John gets there much faster. And even though John was the only apostle to witness Christ die, who stood at the foot of the cross and helped with his burial, the only apostle, John gets to the tomb and he stops. He will not go in. He waits for Peter. They both ran, but the other disciple ran faster than Peter and arrived at the tomb first. He bent down and saw the burial cloths, but did not go in. Why? John, you buried him. Go and find out what's happened to the body of Jesus. No, he waits. He waits for Peter, the one who denied Jesus 3 times, the one who refused to be at the foot of the cross with John, the leader of the church. But because he is the vicar of Christ on earth, because he is the leader of the church, John waits for that sinner to go in first. And so Peter arrives and he sees the tomb is empty and the burial cloths are there and the cloth that covered his head rolled up apart. It's clear no one has taken his body. They would not unroll him and carry out his dead, lifeless body with their bare hands. That cloth wrapping his body would make it easy. You'd grab both ends of the cloth, his body wrapped in it, and you carry it out. But the fact that the cloths were there said he has not been stolen. His body has not been taken. But where is he? And only after Peter goes in, and we don't know what he believes after seeing this, John then goes in, and it says that other disciple went in, and the one who had arrived at the tomb first, and he saw and believed. But he was quiet. John's gospel tells us that John himself did not say anything, but he believed. Where are we in the gradual process of conversion? Have we come to see a corpse, only to leave more upset or distraught than before? Why did you make me wake up this early for a dead religion, right? You know the Pope, you know the bishops and what they've done, priests? Or are we like John? We've come and no, we believe, but we're not going to say anything. We're going to keep our mouths quiet at the family gathering, right? About faith and the Lord and the resurrection and what God has done for me. And let's just stuff our mouth with food and leave that for another day. Or are we like Mary of Magdalene? 5 years ago, on July 22nd, Pope Francis declared Mary of Magdala the apostle to the apostles and gave her liturgically the highest level of solemnity, a liturgical celebration equal to the apostles. Thomas Aquinas was the first to call her the apostle to the apostles. Why? Because unlike John, Mary stayed at the tomb. See, John and Peter went back. It says John and Peter went back to their homes. John believing, Peter, probably not. But Mary stayed there and cried until she sees a young man. And she asks him, well, what have you done with my Lord? He says, why are you weeping? Where have they taken him? And then another man appears behind her, a gardener, she thinks, and he says, why are you weeping? They've taken my Lord, and I don't know where they've put him. But she stayed. She stayed at the church, if you will. Even if she didn't know, even if she didn't believe, she kept coming and she stayed. She wouldn't leave as she wept because God was dead to her. Peter had abandoned him. Peter and John both left. She didn't know whether they believed or not. They left. They went back to their home. But she stayed. And Jesus says to her, Mary. And it's at that moment, according to John, that Mary is the first to see him risen from the dead. And he says to her, go and tell my apostles, my disciples, right, that I have risen. And so unlike John, who goes back home quiet, even though he believes, it's Mary, the laywoman, not the Pope, not the bishop, the cardinal, if you will, the laywoman who goes back and says, he is risen to the apostles. Mary doesn't stay quiet. She is the one who announces to Peter, he is risen. You don't believe, but he is alive. She's the one who tells John, who believes but stayed silent, he is risen. You cannot stay silent. It's the laywoman who announces the good news, not the Pope or the bishop. You, the people of God, who go back and say, he is risen. Her faith is gradual. She comes when it's dark because she doesn't believe. She only knows that he's dead. And yet she comes, like every layperson who continued coming, even online because they couldn't come to church during the pandemic. They continue to come to the empty tomb, praying that spiritual prayer of communion because they couldn't receive Jesus. Even now, people are watching online because they cannot come for different reasons to receive Jesus risen in the Eucharist. But she came. And when the apostles disappointed her, and when the apostles left, she stayed. When the bishops and the Pope, it felt like to her, abandoned her, she stayed. Weeping, but she stayed. And because she stayed, Christ came to her. But we're not sure what to do, and all we can do is weep over the body of Jesus, seemingly dead in the church. Jesus comes to us, and he calls us by name, Mary. He calls us by name. And only if we stay, even in the midst of our tears, and we hear his voice call us by name, it is then that the darkness that led us into the church, the context of that darkness and lack of faith, changes and becomes belief. She turns and wants to cling to him, and he says, do not cling to me yet. I have not risen to my Father. I have not ascended. But go and tell my brothers what you have seen. Go and tell the Pope and the bishops and the priests that you believe. And in the unbelief of Peter, in the silence of John, Mary breaks the silence. Like the sun that broke the dawn after the darkness that captured her coming to the tomb. Mary is the rising sun that announces he is risen. The day has come. The sun shines. The Son of God has risen and is alive. You are the ones who will carry Jesus and announce to the world where you work, where you live, where you eat and drink today, he is risen by our actions. But look, wherever we are in this process right now, whether we've come to see a corpse, whether we've come and we believe but we're not going to say anything and not change how we live, or we've experienced Christ truly risen, he's called us by name and we will never be the same. Wherever we are in that gradual process, the good news is that Christ is risen and he comes to us and he calls us by name. Can you hear him? Yes, the church is half full. And please God, may it be packed with people with coffee mugs in their hand and gum in their mouth, I don't care, and the walls standing in the back and people taking your seats. May it be so next year. It's gradual, just like the lifting of this pandemic and our gradual, hopefully, going back to normal. But the one thing that is certain, no matter where we are in that graduation of faith, that gradual process, he is risen. He stands by us. He calls us by name. Can you hear him? They did not yet understand the scriptures that he had to rise from the dead. Whether we understand or not, nothing changes the fact that Jesus Christ is risen. He is risen indeed, and he calls you by name.